Today I thought I would chat about the controversy between knitting and crochet. I don't really know if controversy is the right word. I was going to use war, but I don't want to use that because there's a lot of war going on at the moment. But there is a little bit of a kind of tension online between knitting and crochet, or knitters and crocheters. Crocheters quite often feel looked down on by knitters and ignored and excluded. And I don't quite know why, and I'm not sure this is an actual problem or this just a perception. So I thought I would chat about it in today's video. If you're new here, my name is Anniken. I design knitting patterns. I teach knitting workshops online and in person, and I sell yarn through our website YarnAddict.co.uk. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. I'm mainly a knitter. I learned to knit as a child. I also learned to crochet as a child, but I didn't crochet as much. I didn't like it as much at the time. Then I relearned as an adult, and I got really into crochet for a few years, and I did several crochet designs, including crochet designs for the American Interweave Crochet magazine. I think I did 2 garments and maybe a couple of accessories for them. And I also did designs for Inside Crochet, Simply Crochet, and the Crochet Project. I think that's what they were called. I think I did at least 1 garment, maybe an accessory or something for them. So I have done a bit of crochet design. Then I had a long gap where I didn't crochet at all for many, many years. Then I got back into it at the start of the pandemic, at the start of the first lockdown, because I had a crochet blanket I hadn't worked on for years that I suddenly picked up and finished. And then since then, I've tried to have something crochet on the go the whole time. And last summer, I crocheted 2 bags. One of them I crocheted just before I went on holiday, and I used it quite a lot on holiday, and I don't think I've used it since. The other one is a raffia tote, which I used a lot last summer, and now that we're in summer again, I'm using it a lot again, and I really, really like it. And I was thinking about writing up the pattern for both of those last year, and I never got around to it. And then I thought, a couple of months ago, I thought I really must do it, but I still haven't done it, and I'm recording this in June, and I'm really busy for the next 3 weeks, and then I'm going to Norway, so I don't know but I will get around to writing them up this summer either. And they very much are kind of summer designs, I feel like. But at the moment, I am crocheting myself a sweater. So this video may not be posted to July, but I'm actually filming it in June, and I am currently working on a crochet sweater for myself. And I'm actually thinking about crocheting a second one once I finish this one, because at the moment I really like it. We'll see what it's like when I finished it, but I really like it. I don't know why there is this tension between knitters and crocheters, and I don't know whether there really is a tension, or is it just that that's what crocheters feel like. So let me know in the comments if you knit or crochet, if you do both. If you only crochet, do you feel like there is a tension between knitters and crocheters? Do you feel like you're being looked down on by knitters? If you're a knitter, how do you view crochet? Give me your honest opinion in the comments. What I've read online, a lot of crocheters feel their knitters look down on them, and they feel excluded. Some of that I think is because a lot of yarn shops mostly promote knitting. So if you go into a yarn shop, at least here in the UK, if you live in another country, let me know what it's like in your country. But certainly in the UK, if you go into a yarn shop, you will see loads of knitted samples, you will see knitting patterns, it'll be mainly geared towards knitting. And they may have a knitting group. They probably don't have a crochet group, although I guess some places might if the owner is really into crochet. But most shops will have a knitting group. I belong to my local knitting group, which is not attached to a shop. Me and another lady originally started it. I don't actually go very much anymore because I just don't have time, and I haven't been since last summer. I might try and put in an appearance, my yearly appearance in August this year, when I'm a bit less busy. But several people there crochet, but it is called knit and natter. And a lot of crocheters, when things are called things like knit and natter, Worldwide Knit in Public Day, which has just been, when I'm filming this, it was the last Saturday. And a lot of crocheters are like, well, what about us? Why are we excluded? And I don't think they are. From what I understand, I haven't done a lot of research into this, but from what I understand, from what I read online this last weekend, I remember this may not be out for quite a while later. But what I read online was that the Worldwide Knitting Public Day was started by, I think, an American woman 20 years ago. And I would say 20 years ago, at least here in the UK, crochet was not very popular. If you went to a yarn shop or a knitting group, you wouldn't see anyone crocheting. I'm sure there were people crocheting, of course there were, but it wasn't as popular. I don't think there were any crochet magazines in the UK then, because I think Simply Crochet and Inside Crochet came later. So I think knitting was very much, at least here in the UK, the most popular yarn hobby, I guess. I noticed that there was a couple of events calling it Stitching Public Day, and I saw a lot of crochets saying, why can't we be more exclusive? Why is it Knitting Public Day? I think it's just Worldwide Knitting Public Day because that's what the person who started, she was probably a knitter, didn't think about crochet. And certainly if I was at an event on Saturday, which I wasn't, but if I had gone to an event, I probably would have brought my crochet because I'm working on a crochet sweater at the moment, and it's fairly easy and it's something I could do while sitting chatting to people. Or I would have brought my sock. Depending, I probably would have brought both, and depending on how much I was chatting, I choose which one to work for. But I don't. Also, if I was going to go to my local knitting group this week, I would probably bring my crochet project because that's my priority project at the moment, apart from a deadline project I'm working on, which I wouldn't work on in public. But so for me, I would go into something that's advertised as a knitting space and crochet and wouldn't bother. And when I have crocheted in public, or if I crocheted in a knitting group or in a yarn shop, I've never had anyone come up to me and say, oh, why are you crocheting? Why are you not knitting? Knitting is so much better. Never had that experience. So I don't know whether this thing that knitters look down on crocheters is really a thing, or whether it's just that crocheters imagine it. Now, I will say that if you think people look down on you, you may be justified in thinking that. So if as a crochet you think, well, yeah, we're definitely made to feel like second-class citizens, that may well be the case. I'm not saying it's not, although your perception is not valid. Sound like a bit like a therapist here, don't I? But sometimes we imagine that people think things about us that they're not thinking, because of our own insecurities. I don't know whether that comes into play here or not. It's difficult because I haven't had that experience. So let me know if you have. So why do knitters look down on crochets? If they look down on crochets, why would be that? Has crochet got a poor image? I think it does have. I think the image that crochet quite often has is chunky. It's very colourful, which some people love and some people think look a bit tacky. It's not suitable for garments. It's too chunky and thick and don't know what I want to say. Yeah, it's not suitable for garments. You don't get the drape that you get with knitted fabric. That's not true, but that's the perception. And a lot of crocheters, I think, tend to use acrylic. And there's nothing wrong with using acrylic. I know I am known as a bit of a yarn snob. I definitely am. I prefer to use natural fibers. But there's nothing wrong with using acrylic. If you want to use acrylic because you prefer it, it fits your budget, it has the colors you want, you like the feel of it, you'd like the fact that it's easy to wash and all that kind of stuff, that's fine. Doesn't really matter as long as you enjoy what you're doing. But I personally don't like working with a lot of acrylic. Although if I was going to make a blanket, I would consider acrylic. Although the last acrylic crochet blanket I started, I gave up on and gave to my daughter to finish. She hasn't finished it yet, but I gave it to her because she's into crochet on and off a bit, because I wasn't enjoying crocheting with the yarn. And I don't know whether that's because it was acrylic or this just because I didn't like that yarn. But it's put me off buying more acrylic yarn for a crochet blanket because I'm worried I'm not going to like it. And I do have access to cheaper wool yarns, so I'd rather use those because some I can get wholesale. So I'd rather use that than acrylic. But I can understand that acrylic does have a place, and I don't want to be accused of yarn snobbery. But I think that's just the image that crochet has. And I think the reason crochet has that image is because when you say to a non-crocheter, if you say crochet, they probably think of like a very colourful granny square blanket. Now, last few years, especially at YarnAddict, but several UK shows that I've been to, but especially YarnAddict, there seem to be way more crochets at YarnAddict than other British yarn shows that I've been to. And I think the reason for that is that a very popular crocheter called Lucy, she has the blog in the attic, something attic. I can't remember. Lucy in the attic? I think she's called Lucy, and her blog is something in the attic. And it really annoys me that I can't remember it. But when YarnAddict first started, I know she was involved in promoting it and possibly organizing it. I'm not sure. She lives in the town, or at least when I used to read her blog regularly, she lived in the town that YarnAddict is organized. I don't know whether she's still involved with YarnAddict or not. I'm not sure. But I think because she was in the early days, I think maybe that's why YarnAddict is very popular with crocheters. But I have more people asking me if I sell crochet patterns at YarnAddict than any other show, which is why I've been thinking I really should create some smaller crochet projects, just so I can say yes, I have some crochet patterns. I find it very difficult now to write crochet patterns because I haven't done it for so long, so it just takes a long time, and that's what's put me off doing it really. But I see so much crochet, especially at YarnAddict. But what I see mostly are those kind of granny square cardigans, hexagon cardigans. I'm not they call hexy cardigan. I'm not sure they're called. I think there's various ones that kind of look like granny squares or hexagons and things like that. And some of them are very colourful. Some of them are very muted and elegant, and some of them are very colourful and fun. And I actually like most of them. I think even the really bright ones look really good because I quite like a bit of splash of colour. And I think somewhere like a yarn show is where you can get away with showing that off, whereas maybe you wouldn't in your normal everyday life. You can definitely get away with it at a yarn show. And I have noticed that it has been a lot more popular, but a lot of people don't like that kind of look and think that looks a bit not their thing. I quite like it, but a lot of people don't. So I wonder whether that's why crochet has a kind of poor image. And I guess it's also the fact that granny squares are really popular and they're called granny squares. So it just reinforces that crochet granny hobby type thing, which also annoys me. I mean, knitting has that thing. People talk about knitting nanas, knitting grannies. It has that kind of old lady image a bit, but among non-knitters, and it really, really annoys me because when I also go to yarn shows, I've seen knitters and crocheters from teenagers to 80-something-year-olds, men, women, across all walks of life, all social classes, really, buttoned up, twin set and pearls, middle class ladies to people who are like tattooed and pierced to within an inch of their life. I mean, like everything. So I don't think the stereotypical view of knitters and crocheters is really accurate if you actually spend time with knitters and crocheters. I think that image is very wrong. A lot of yarn shops focus on knitting, at least in the UK. If you live other places, especially in the US, it's that different because I get the impression that crochet is more popular in the US. You go to Norway, you see lots of people knit in public. Quite often I'll go into a coffee shop in Norway and there'll be somebody knitting. I'll be on the train and somebody will be knitting. At the airport somebody will be knitting. A couple of years ago I went into Oslo. I was there in September on my own. I went into Oslo and I went into a park near a yarn shop because I'd cycled there from the city centre and I was a bit warm, so I just wanted to sit in the shade and cool down for a bit. And I saw 4 or 5 different people knitting in the park. They were all quite young women knitting. I think it was lunchtime, so maybe they're on their lunch break, I don't know. But I saw several people knitting. And I see a lot of younger people knitting in Norway than I do here in the UK. I don't think I've ever seen anyone crochet in Norway. So I think in Norway, knitting is definitely more popular than crochet. Here, I don't know. If I see people out and about knitting, it's mostly, or crocheting, it's mostly knitting. I can't remember apart from at yarn shows when I saw somebody crochet out and about. I'm not sure. Mostly knitting. So I think knitting maybe is more popular. But I also wouldn't look down on somebody crocheting in public, but I think knitting is still more popular than crochet, although crochet has definitely had an increase in popularity in recent years. Definitely become more popular. I think crochet is easier for beginners, maybe, especially because I think a lot of people think of knitting, they feel like they have to knit garments. And with crochet, I think a lot of people think they can just make some like colorful granny square blankets and cushion covers and things like that. I think that may be where the difference is, that people feel like I can crochet, I can buy a cheap acrylic yarn, I can crochet a colorful granny square blanket, and I've achieved something. Whereas if I knit, I feel like I have to knit a garment, which is a much bigger undertaking, not in terms of hours, because a blanket takes a long time, but with a garment, it has to fit, otherwise you're going to feel like you failed. So if you finish it and it doesn't fit right, or you don't like it or whatever, you're going to feel like you failed. Whereas with crochet, I feel like if you do like a blanket or something, you probably feel like you've done something worthwhile. I would say the knitting and crochet is suitable to different things. If I was going to do a blanket, even though you can knit a blanket, if I was going to do a blanket, I probably would go for crochet because it has a bit more structure. So probably I've made three, three or four crochet blankets now, whereas I only have one knitted blanket. And if I was going to make another blanket, it'd definitely be a crochet one. A lot of yarn shops focus on knitwear. They have knit and natter groups. They have knitting patterns. They have knitted samples on displays. Most of the big yarn companies focus on knitwear. They may also do some crochet patterns, but they mainly focus on knitwear. And I think in the UK, Stylecraft focus a bit more on crochet, and I think that's because Lucy in the Attic. Is the blog called Lucy in the Attic? Anyway, if you're a crochet, you probably know who I'm talking about, because I think she's still very popular. But I think because of her, and I think she at least used to, because I used to read her blog quite regularly back in the day when I used to read a lot of blogs before other social media like Twitter and Instagram and stuff. And I know back then she used to use a lot of Stylecraft acrylic. So I think Stylecraft maybe are a bit more focused on crochets because of that. Whereas I don't know if I've ever seen a crochet pattern from yarn companies like Rowan. Maybe they do and I just haven't noticed it. Let me know if you're a crocheter and some of these bigger yarn companies do crochet patterns. So I don't know whether there is, I don't understand why there is a tension between knitters and crocheters. We all make stuff with our hands using yarn. And then if you think about things like macrame, there's probably other things you can make from yarn. I mean, we're all using yarn, we're all being creative, we're all using our hands, we're all doing stuff. Why does there have to be a difference? So do we need to rename things like Worldwide Knitting Public Day? Does it need to be Worldwide Stitching Public Day? The Knitting and Crochet Show, Alexandra Palace, Harrogate, and a couple other places is now called the Knit and Crochet Show. And I will have some news about the Harrogate show very soon. I'm not going to say why, but somebody might be teaching there this year. More info on that coming soon. But it's now called the Knit and Crochet Show. But they also sell stuff for sewing there. And I know they do classes that involve sewing machines. So I'm assuming they are classes in sewing classes or embroidery, machine embroidery classes or whatever. But they're not called sewing knit and crochet. They're just called Knit and Crochet. There used to be one in London called the Knitting and Stitching Show, I think. Was that the one that was at Alexandra Palace called the Knitting and Stitching Show? I think it's now called Knit and Crochet. The Knitting and Stitching, that's probably more accurate, because at least when I went last summer, which is a long time ago now, there was a lot of sewing stuff, like so many machine manufacturers and fabric and stuff like that. And I guess stitching involves everyone, but then some people think stitching, they think sewing, and they don't think of knitters and crocheters. If I said stitching to a non-knitting friend, they'd probably think of sewing when I say stitching, not knitting and crochet and sewing. The shows that I normally exhibit at, Yarndale and Ravel, Wonderful, although I didn't do Wonderful this year. Those kind of shows mainly focuses on knitting, spinning and crochet. I would say most stalls are aimed at knitters and spinners. Most stalls are selling yarn, fibre, things like that, knitting and spinning accessories and patterns and stuff. But there are more and more people who are aiming at crochet. Obviously, if you're selling yarn, anyone can buy that. You can buy yarn for knitting, you can buy yarn for crochet, but a lot of people like to have patterns to choose from. So quite often I have people at shows saying, do you sell crochet patterns? I say no, and I'm like, but you can still use my yarn for crochet. But I guess a lot of people want to buy the yarn with the pattern. So I don't know why there's this tension between knitting and crochet. I've never looked down on crochet. Knitting is my main hobby and my job, but I also crochet. I've also taught crochet workshops. I've taught how to crochet workshops, not for a long time, because I find teaching knitting a lot easier. But if somebody asked me to teach a crochet workshop, I would. I even taught myself mosaic crochet because I was teaching a mosaic knitting workshop, and the organizer said to me, there are some people who crochet and they may want to do mosaic crochet. And I was like, well, I've never done it. And she said, well, this is a good tutorial. So I only had like a couple of weeks notice. I spent like a couple of weeks practicing mosaic crochet, and the organizer actually had a mosaic crochet pattern that they could use, and mosaic knitting pattern. And I turned up for the workshop and I said, right, I understand some of you crochet, so do you want to do mosaic crochet? And they all did mosaic knitting. So I spent like 2 weeks teaching myself how to do it for no reason, but I enjoyed it. And I haven't done it since, but I would if I saw the right pattern or I got inspired to do it. I certainly enjoyed doing it. But I have taught crochet, and I would teach crochet now if somebody asked me to. But I think knitting will always be my thing because that's what I'm best at. But I will dip in and out of crochet if I want to. And if I organize a knit and natter group or a knitting group or a knitting event, I would certainly not be unhappy if crochets turned up. I do think that there probably is a justification at the moment for calling things knit and crochet or stitch, because it does sound more inclusive. But let me know in the comments, if you're a crochet, do you feel excluded if people talk about knitting and you turn up as a crochet? Do you feel excluded? Let me know in the comments what you think. That's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Do share your views on this in the comments, and please be respectful. If somebody says they don't like crochet, they think it looks old-fashioned and granny-like, then do be respectful, please. Don't have a fight in the comments, that's all I ask. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. I will see you in the next video.